Now that we've created a couple of OTLs, I want to talk a little bit more about how Houdini deals with type names. Now, Houdini does actually define a standardized naming conventions for its types. And that naming convention allows us to specify several different components, and we'll look at how that works in this video. We'll also look at how to define our own naming convention for how Houdini is going to name things when we put down our OTLs, which can be a useful way of standardizing how custom OTLs are treated in Houdini. So first of all, we're going to be changing the type name, and notice that we can't do that just from the type properties. If I right click on my tentacles create lines OTL here and go to type properties, and on the basic tab, you can see that I can change the label, but I can't change the operator type name. So we'll actually have to copy the OTL in order to change that. So if you remember, we do that by going to the Assets menu and going to the Asset Manager. And then it's in our scanned asset library directories. And here's my create lines OTL. So I'm just going to go ahead and expand that and right click on the OTL type itself, not on the path on disk, remember. And we're going to say copy. And I'm going to go ahead and rename the type name here. So the way this works is Houdini allows us to define up to 3 components for each node type. And these components are going to be separated by 2 colons. So for example, I might say that the first component is a namespace of sorts. So I'm just going to call that effects.phd. And for our purposes, it's just important that we put something here that tells us that this type is a custom OTL. And the reason for that is that later in this video, we're going to be talking about how to create a script that will affect all nodes that get instantiated in Houdini. And we don't want that script to apply to the Houdini default nodes. So we're just going to use our own little naming convention within side effects and put something here that says this OTL is mine, not one of Houdini's. Then we're going to put the OTL's base name as the second component, and I'm just going to call that tentacles underscore create lines, and then another double colon to define the third component. And in that case, it's going to just be the version number, which is 1. And in fact, we're just going to make this version 2 because we're in fact changing the OTL itself. I'm going to change the label to version 2 as well. Now the label doesn't have to match the name, but I'm just going to go ahead and include the effects.phd part so that it's easy to find them in the tab menu. So let's just go ahead and put effects.phd tentacles create lines v02. And again, I'm going to save it into my nice directory structure here. Okay. And then we'll just hit accept. And if we go up to our current hip file, Houdini has added our new OTL type. Now, the cool thing about this is if we go ahead and expand this, we can see that Houdini has already recognized this naming convention, and it's using it to insert its own information into the type name here. So you can see that there's this object slash, which says this type belongs at object level. And you can see that it's put it as part of the base name component here instead of putting it at the very beginning. So if we go down here and look at one that doesn't use that naming convention, Houdini just has to stick it at the beginning. So if we hit close, another result of this, I'm just going to go ahead and put down the new one. So tentacles create lines v02. All right, so the cool thing about using this naming convention is that if I just go ahead and open a Python shell really fast, and then I just drag my create lines OTL in here. And I'm just going to assign .type to a variable called t so that I can inspect what's available to me on the type. If I say t.name components, Houdini knows how to split out the naming convention into components like this. And you might be thinking, oh, we could just use Python split like this. to get something that's kind of similar. And you'd be right about this, but the nice thing about this is that if we use Houdini's name components function, we're protected against future naming convention changes. So it's better to use the name components function than doing our own split to get the components. All right, so another final quirk that I'd like to point out is that Houdini has removed both the version information and the namespace and just done a very plain naming convention that only contains the base name of the OTL type name. Now, to be honest, this is probably a reasonable thing to do, but I'd like to show you how we can go about creating our own conventions for this. And it'd also be kind of cool if Houdini assigned a custom color to our custom nodes. So the way we can do this is by adding a Python script to our OTL definition. So I'm just going to go ahead and allow editing of contents and go to type properties. And the way we can do that is by going to the scripts tab. Now, Houdini allows us to define a bunch of custom events here under the event handler menu. And the one that we're interested in is onCreated, but you can see there are a whole bunch of other events that we could use, like onLoaded, onUpdated, onDeleted, onInputChanged is particularly useful. There's also a Python module, which we may be looking at later in this class. For now, let's just look at onCreated. And let's start by just doing a custom color. Now, one thing that you just kind of have to know is that in these event handler scripts, you have access to a special variable called kwargs. Kwargs contains various bits of information about whatever context you're in. In this case, it'll be about the node that's being instantiated since we're in the onCreated script. So to see how that works, I'm just going to go ahead and print that and hit apply. And now when I put down my new create lines OTL, it should print out what the value of kwargs is. So you can see that we have this node key that contains the instance that is just being created, and that's what we want to access. And it also contains a type, which is also useful information for us. So let's just go ahead and close that for now and get rid of this. And let's just start by setting the color. So I'm going to say kwargs node dot set color, and the way the set color function works is expecting a who.color object, so we need to instantiate that. Who.color, as you can see from the help here, takes either a list or a tuple of RGB values. And so I'm going to just hit the C key here in the network editor to pick some kind of color here that I want to use. And maybe I'll just go for this nice teal color. So now I need to know what the RGB values of this are, so I'm just going to bring my Python shell back up and drag my node in and just say .color. Oops, that's a lowercase c, of course. And that'll tell me what my RGB components are. So I'm gonna just go ahead and copy those. We'll make a tuple and paste our nice components. And delete the RGB part. Put in enough parentheses until we get back to the set color function. So now if we hit apply and hit OK, I'm going to hit C to dismiss that color palette and close my Python shell here. And let's just go ahead and see if it worked. Tentacles, create lines version 2. Put it down, and yes, it's now my nice friendly teal color. All right, so let's go ahead and define our custom naming convention now that we have our onCreated script working. Now, the way that I usually like to define naming conventions like this is I like to first create a template string. And the reason for that is that it makes it really easy to change after the fact. And also, oftentimes you want these sorts of things to be defined in preferences files, and it's useful to create your code so that it's easy to change it to that kind of thing. So I'm just going to say name template equals, and we're going to use Python format syntax. Now I could just use these empty curly braces and just say like, oh, I'm going to have just two components here for the name template. But I usually like to put names in there so that it's a little bit easier to tell what they are. So I'm just going to say, actually, let's call this scope. And the second one we'll call base name. And then I'm just going to define what those things mean. And we're going to do that using the components. So I'm just going to assign that to a variable for now. So I'm going to say node name, let's say node type name components equal kwargs type dot name components. And then I'm just going to define the arguments that are going to be passed into the format function. So we'll just say node name kwargs equal, and when I define lists of things in dictionaries like this, I like to put each item onto its own line so that it's a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to say something like scope is node type name components, and that'll be index 1. If I just bring my Python shell back up like this, we can see that that'll be the ifxphd component, which is 0, 1, index 1. And then for base name, I'm going to say that's index 2 because that's going to be this tentacles create lines thing. So I'm just going to copy paste this part, get rid of the comma, change it to index 2. And maybe it'd be nice while we're defining our custom naming convention here to make the ifxphd part capitalized, just so that it's really obvious that it's a custom OTL. So I'm going to just put a dot upper here, just so that it makes it a nice unique naming convention for the purposes of example. So now I'm just going to go ahead and build the node name itself. So we're going to say node name equals node name template dot format, and then we're going to say star star node name kwargs. And this star star just means that we're going to take each item in this dictionary and use it as a keyword argument that's being passed into the format function. So this is the same as if we had written something like this. I'll just copy this whole line. So it's the same as if we had written something like this. And then it would also have base name in there. So this is long and cumbersome, and it won't change when we change our dictionary here. So we just use this star star to tell it to use that dictionary instead of doing it like this. And now we just need to set our node name, kwargs node.setName node name. And there's actually a problem with how we're doing this, and I'll show you that after I break it. So we'll do tentacles, create lines v02, and we get our nice naming convention here. Now, the thing that breaks is if we do tentacles, create lines v02 again, you notice that we get an error here. And the reason for that is that we're trying to set the name to something that already exists, and for some reason, by default, Houdini will not create a unique name. So what I'd like to do is just say unique. Let's actually just double check what the name of the function is, and set name. Yes, it's unique underscore name equals false by default. So I'm just going to say unique underscore name equals true. Hit apply. And now if I say tentacles create lines v02, Houdini just appends this 1 on the end. Now it's actually pretty smart about how it figures out its unique name. And this brings me to the next thing that I want to do for my naming convention here. I don't really like that when I put down the first one, it doesn't have a number, and then when I put down the second one, it does. Even though that's kind of how Houdini works in general. I'd kind of like it to put a 1 there by default. So what I'm going to do is just add underscore 1 on the end of my name template. And Houdini is actually smart enough, if I just delete both of these, it'll put the underscore 1 there, and then if I put another one down, Houdini is actually smart enough to just figure out that it needs to be underscore 2 for the next one. So this is pretty cool. It's working pretty well, but the problem is that if we were to go and make a bunch of other nodes in our setup, we're going to have to copy paste this script every time. And we could just make an external module and call a function and then remember to put that into the uncreated script of every node that we make. But it'd be nice if we could just make a global uncreated script, check for that effects.phd component in our type name, and just always run this code on that node when it gets instantiated. Fortunately, Houdini does make this possible. And I'm going to show you where you can find that in the help, just so that you have a nice reference for that. So I'm going to go to help contents. And then down here under Python scripting, we can go there. And then we can go to Python script locations. And under digital asset event handlers, notice that it's named event handlers the same way as the menu here in the type properties dialog, so it's a little bit easier to find that way. If we just expand that, we can look at node event handler files. And this will tell us where to put and how to name our event scripts in order to do what we want to do. Now, the part that we're interested in here is this last part. So we're going to just go ahead and look at how to do that really fast. So I have here my Houdini user pref dir. And if you remember, we can use hconfig-a to find that Houdini user pref dir variable. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a scripts directory, because notice that it tells me that I need to put my event.py into a scripts directory. It doesn't already exist, so we need to create it. So I'm going to do a new folder and say scripts. And we're just going to go inside. And I'm going to do a new text document. And we're just going to call it oncreated.py. Yes, I want to change it to Python. Now, you might be a little bit worried because this uncreated doesn't have a space, and this one does have a space, and maybe some of these aren't the same name. So in the help, if we just scroll up, we can actually see what the file needs to be named by looking at this section here. So it just says oncreated here is the uncreated script. So we need oncreated.py because that's what it says here. All right, so now that I have my oncreated.py, I'm going to just right-click and edit it with Notepad++. And I'm just gonna go ahead and copy the code across. In fact, I'm going to do Control-X and just delete the uncreated module from my create lines v02 HDA, because our uncreated global script is going to be doing it. Let's just paste it here. The kwargs variable is still available here. It almost works exactly the same way. So all we're going to do is just check that first component and make sure that it's set to fxphd so that we know that it's a custom OTL. So in order to do that, we're going to need the node type name components variable at the top. So let's just put it here. And then we'll just say if node type name components 1 equals fxphd. Then do all this stuff. And otherwise, it works exactly the same as my oncreated script that was part of the OTL itself. It's just that now, anytime I make a new OTL that's fxphd related, I know that I'm going to get my correct naming convention, and it's going to set it to a custom color. Let's just save it. And now we do have to restart Houdini in order to make this work. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that really fast. And we're back. All right, so let's just test it out and see if it works. So if I do tentacles, create lines, I do indeed get my custom naming convention, just as I did when it was part of the OTL's definition. And we can just go to our type properties and double check that there is no uncreated script, and that's correct. So it is in fact coming from the one in my scripts directory. And we can tell that it's only running on nodes that have that fxphd component to it by putting down a null or something. And we can see that it did not color it the custom color, so we know that it didn't run it. Now let's just try out the flexibility of it. Let's go ahead and fix our emitter also. So I'm just going to follow that same process. I'm going to go to my create emitter, and I'm going to copy it and just name it fxphd : create emitter : 1. I'm not going to put the tentacles part in there just because this create emitter could be used for a bunch of other things like rain or snow or something like that. So it's more of a generic OTL, so it doesn't need tentacles as part of it. And actually, we're going to make it version 2. And we'll change that in the label as well. And I'm just going to put the fxphd label also, just so that it's ready to go. Let me just choose a place to save it to. And we are ready to go. Hit accept. We can see that we have our create emitter here. And we are using it because it's not red. And let's see if it works. Create emitter v02. And it did. We have our nice naming convention and our good coloring as well. In this video, we looked at how to use Houdini's naming convention that works with its name components function. And we also looked at how to add an uncreated script to our OTL type. Then we looked at how to create an uncreated script for every node in Houdini. In future videos, we'll continue making OTLs out of our tentacles setup.